Principal Arthur Higgins stood at the cafeteria entrance, clipboard in hand, his thin lips curled into a smile that never reached his eyes. The fluorescent lights reflected off his designer glasses as he scanned the lunch line like a judge at the gates of hell. Maya Thorne. His voice cut through the chatter of hungry third graders. The room fell silent. I don't see your father's payment for this week's facility enhancement fee. The 8-year-old girl's hands trembled around her lunch tray. My dad said he already paid the regular lunch. Then your father clearly doesn't understand how a proper school operates. Higgins's smile widened. You know where your seat is, Miss Thorne. On the floor. Where children of your kind belong. Behind the cafeteria's glass door, unseen by the preening principal, a shadow shifted. 6'4" of leather, muscle, and barely controlled fury. Jackson Sledge. Thorne had just arrived to deliver his daughter's forgotten strawberry milk. What he was about to witness would shake this school district to its foundations. 6 hours earlier, the morning sun barely crested the horizon when Jackson Thorne's custom Harley-Davidson rumbled to life in the driveway of their modest duplex. The beast of chrome and steel purred beneath him, a sound that once struck fear into the hearts of rival gangs across 3 states. Now, it was the soundtrack to his daughter's morning routine. Daddy, did you remember to pack my science project? Maya's voice piped up from behind him, muffled by the purple helmet that was almost comically large on her small head. Jackson smiled, a rare expression that few people outside this driveway ever witnessed. It's in the saddlebag, baby girl. Triple-checked it myself. He felt her small arms tighten around his waist as they pulled onto the street. The morning ride to Riverside Elementary had become their sacred ritual over the past 3 years, ever since Maya's mother had walked out without a backward glance. Just left a note on the kitchen counter. I can't do this anymore. The life, the fear, the club. I'm sorry. Jackson had burned that note the same day. But he'd kept Maya's laughter alive every single morning since. As they cruised through the awakening suburbs, Jackson was acutely aware of the stares. Soccer moms in their SUVs, their eyes widening at the sight of the Iron Vanguard MC's president ferrying a pink backpack-wearing child to elementary school. He'd grown used to it. The judgment, the whispered concerns about that man dropping off that poor little girl. What they didn't see was the straight-A report card in Maya's backpack, the handmade Father's Day cards covering his refrigerator, the way she sang off-key to the radio, completely unaware that her father commanded the loyalty of over 300 of the most dangerous men in the state. Jackson had made a promise to himself the day he became a single father. Maya would have a normal childhood. She would go to birthday parties, join the school choir, believe in fairy tales. She would never see the darkness that lived in the world her father navigated every day. The school zone sign appeared ahead, and Jackson downshifted, the Harley's rumble softening to a purr. He pulled into the drop-off lane, carefully positioning the bike so Maya could dismount safely onto the curb. She pulled off her helmet, her dark curls springing free in a wild halo around her face. Love you, Daddy. Love you more, Princess. He helped her shoulder her backpack, then watched as she joined the stream of children flowing toward the entrance. That's when he saw him. Principal Arthur Higgins stood at the school's front entrance like a sentinel, his arms crossed over his pressed Oxford shirt. The man's eyes tracked Maya's approach with obvious disdain, then lifted to lock onto Jackson. Higgins approached the curb with measured steps, each one radiating authority he clearly believed he possessed. Mr. Thorne. Principal Higgins. Jackson kept his voice neutral, his hands resting casually on the Harley's handlebars. He'd learned over the years that appearing too intimidating at the school only made things harder for Maya. I trust you received my email about the facility enhancement fee? Higgins's tone suggested he already knew the answer. It's quite overdue. Jackson's jaw tightened imperceptibly. I pay for Maya's lunch every month. The fees the district requires. I don't recall any facility enhancement being mandatory. Well, at properly run institutions, we maintain certain standards. Higgins's eyes drifted pointedly to Jackson's leather vest, the Iron Vanguard MC patch prominent on the back. Standards that require additional resources to maintain, especially for families that might bring unwanted attention to our school. The threat was thinly veiled. Pay extra, or your daughter pays the price. Jackson felt the familiar heat rising in his chest. the same fire that had once led him to break a man's jaw for disrespecting his club. But here, in this school parking lot, with Maya's future on the line, he swallowed it down. "I'll look into it," he said evenly. "See that you do." Higgins turned on his heel, then paused. "Oh, and Mr. Thorne? Perhaps consider a more appropriate vehicle for school drop-offs. The noise disturbs our learning environment." Jackson watched the principal walk away, his hands gripping the handlebars so tightly his knuckles went white beneath his tattoos. He'd faced down Mexican cartels, survived 3 shootouts, and once negotiated a truce between warring clubs with nothing but his reputation and his fists. But this bureaucratic predator in a cheap suit? This was a different kind of war. Jackson kick-started the Harley and pulled away, forcing himself to breathe slowly. Maya needed this school. She had friends here, teachers who actually seemed to care about her. He couldn't let his pride destroy that. What Jackson didn't know, couldn't have known as he rode toward the Iron Vanguard's clubhouse on the industrial edge of town, was that Principal Higgins's cruelty extended far beyond shakedown fees. And in just a few hours, Jackson was about to discover exactly how far. The cafeteria at Riverside Elementary smelled like industrial-grade pizza and bleach, a combination that Maya Thorne had grown to associate with shame. She stood in the lunch line, her rainbow-decorated lunch card clutched in her small hand, watching as her classmates chattered excitedly about the afternoon recess. Emma Chun was going to bring her new jump rope. Marcus Williams had smuggled in his Game Boy. Normal third-grade problems. Normal third-grade joys. Maya tried to smile along, tried to pretend everything was fine. Then Principal Higgins appeared at the cafeteria entrance. The man moved through the room like a shark through a school of fish, his clipboard held before him like a sacred scroll. The lunch ladies, 2 tired-looking women in hairnets, immediately straightened their postures, their faces going carefully blank. "Attention, students," Higgins announced, his voice cutting through the din with practiced authority. "Before you sit down to eat, I'll be conducting our daily compliance check." Maya's stomach dropped. She knew what was coming, had known it was coming every day for the past 2 weeks, ever since her father had refused to pay the mysterious enhancement fee that Higgins had invented out of thin air. "When I call your name," Higgins continued, scanning his clipboard with theatrical precision, "you will proceed to your assigned seating area." Most students looked confused. This was new to them. But Maya, and 3 other children scattered throughout the cafeteria, understood perfectly. "Michael Patterson," Higgins called out. A small boy with thick glasses and a patched jacket shuffled forward. "Your mother still hasn't responded to my calls about the overdue textbook replacement fee. You know where to sit." The boy's face crumpled, but he nodded and moved toward the far corner of the cafeteria, the area near the industrial mop bucket and the garbage bins. The area where the floor was perpetually sticky with spilled milk and dropped food. "Jenny Martinez," Higgins continued. "Your sister's behavioral issues last semester created additional administrative burden. Floor seating." One by one, Higgins called out children whose families couldn't, or wouldn't, bend to his arbitrary financial demands. Children whose parents worked 2 jobs and couldn't afford designer clothes for parent-teacher conferences. Children whose last names marked them as undesirable in Higgins's carefully curated vision of what Riverside Elementary should represent. Maya's heart hammered against her ribs. Maya Thorne. There it was. Every head in the cafeteria turned toward her. She felt Emma Chen's pitying glance. Heard someone whisper, "That's the biker's kid." "Miss Thorne." Higgins's smile was cruel in its politeness. "I still don't see your father's payment for the facility enhancement fee. And given your family's questionable associations, I'm afraid you represent a reputational liability to this institution." Maya's teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, started to stand from the faculty table. "Principal Higgins, this is none of your concern, Mrs. Rodriguez. Unless you'd like to discuss your own contract renewal." Higgins didn't even look at the teacher. His eyes remained fixed on Maya. "Miss Thorne knows where her seat is. Don't you, dear?" Maya wanted to scream, wanted to cry, wanted to tell this horrible man that her daddy was the strongest, bravest person in the world and could make him disappear with a single phone call. But she'd promised her father she wouldn't cause trouble, promised she'd keep her head down and just get through the school year. So Maya picked up her lunch tray, a slice of cold, grease-congealed pizza, and a bruised apple, and walked toward the corner, toward the floor. The other floor kids were already there, sitting cross-legged on the stained linoleum like prisoners in some Victorian workhouse. Michael Patterson had tears running down his cheeks. Jenny Martinez stared at her food like it might offer escape. Maya sat down between them, her back against the wall, her lunch tray balanced on her knees. The floor was cold and sticky. The smell from the nearby garbage bins made her want to gag. From her position, she could see the other students sitting at proper tables, laughing and trading snacks, living the normal elementary school experience that she desperately craved. Principal Higgins walked past their corner, his expensive leather shoes clicking on the floor. He glanced down at them with obvious satisfaction, like a collector admiring his most prized possessions. "Remember, children," he said sweetly, "proper behavior earns proper privileges. When your families decide to contribute appropriately to this school's excellence, you'll be welcome at the tables with everyone else." He walked away, leaving the 4 children sitting on the floor in silence. Maya took a bite of her cold pizza. It tasted like cardboard and shame. She thought about her father, probably at the clubhouse right now, handling whatever complicated business the Iron Vanguard dealt with. He worked so hard to give her a good life. Worked so hard to keep her safe and fed and happy. And she couldn't even tell him about this. Couldn't add this burden to his shoulders. So Maya ate her lunch on the floor and told herself the same lie she'd been telling herself for 2 weeks. Tomorrow will be better. Jackson Thorne stood in the Iron Vanguard's garage bay, his hands black with engine grease, when he heard the familiar voice of his VP, Marcus Rook Henderson. "Boss, you seen Maya's lunchbox anywhere?" Jackson looked up from the carburetor he'd been rebuilding and spotted it immediately. The purple insulated bag with cartoon unicorns dancing across its surface, sitting on his workbench where he'd placed it after Maya had dashed out of the bike's saddlebag that morning. Shit. Jackson wiped his hands on a rag. She forgot her good lunch. Inside that bag was Maya's favorite, the strawberry milk she'd been saving, the sandwich Jackson had carefully made with the crusts cut off just the way she liked, the apple slices with the special caramel dip. Without it, she'd be stuck with whatever the cafeteria was serving. Rook raised an eyebrow. "Want me to run it over?" Jackson considered it for a moment. Rook was his second in command, a former Marine sniper who could navigate a firefight with his eyes closed. But Rook also looked exactly like what he was, a dangerous man covered in prison tattoos and scars from knife fights. "Nah, I'll do it." Jackson grabbed his leather vest from the back of a chair. "Maya's got enough weird looks from the other parents. Don't need you showing up looking like you're about to rob the place." Rook grinned. "Fair point, boss." Jackson fired up his Harley and headed back toward Riverside Elementary, the lunchbox secured in the saddlebag. He tried not to think about Principal Higgins's smug face that morning, tried not to let the anger simmer. Just drop off the lunch. In and out. Don't make a scene. He pulled into the visitor parking lot 15 minutes later, killed the engine, and headed toward the main entrance. The school secretary, a kindly older woman named Mrs. Patterson who'd always been pleasant to him, looked up with a smile. "Mr. Thorne, is everything all right?" Maya forgot her lunch. "Thought I'd drop it off before she's stuck eating whatever they're serving today." Mrs. Patterson's smile faltered almost imperceptibly. "Oh, yes, of course. The cafeteria is. I remember where it is. Thanks, Mrs. Patterson." Jackson walked down the familiar hallway, his boots echoing on the polished floor. Parent artwork lined the walls, handprint turkeys and crayon rainbows. The innocence of it all made his chest tight. This was the world he wanted for Maya. A world of art projects and spelling bees. A world where the worst thing that could happen was a forgotten lunchbox. He reached the cafeteria doors and started to push them open, then froze. Through the small window in the door, he could see the cafeteria interior. Students at tables, laughing and eating. Teachers monitoring from their corner table. And in the far corner, near the garbage bins and the industrial cleaning supplies, he saw something that made his blood turn to ice. For children sitting on the floor, his eyes found her immediately. Maya, his baby girl, sitting cross-legged on the dirty cafeteria floor, her back pressed against the wall, her lunch tray balanced precariously on her knees. Her head was bowed, her dark curls falling forward to hide her face. But Jackson could see her shoulders shaking. She was crying. The lunchbox slipped from Jackson's hand, hitting the floor with a dull thud that he barely heard over the roaring in his ears. Time seemed to slow down. Jackson's hand reached for the cafeteria door handle, his fingers wrapping around the cold metal. Through the window, he watched as a student walked past Maya, accidentally kicking her apple off her tray. It rolled across the floor, stopping near a garbage bin. Maya didn't even try to retrieve it. Just sat there, tears streaming down her face, eating her cold pizza with mechanical movements. How long? Jackson's mind screamed. How long has this been happening? All those mornings when she'd been quiet on the ride to school. All those evenings when she'd pushed her dinner around her plate without eating. The nightmares she'd been having lately that she insisted were just bad dreams. She'd been protecting him. His fierce, beautiful little girl had been suffering this humiliation in silence because she didn't want to cause her daddy any more trouble. Jackson's hand tightened on the door handle. Every instinct in his body screamed for violence. He could picture it clearly, storming into that cafeteria, grabbing Principal Higgins by his pretentious collar, and introducing his face to the nearest wall. But then he saw Mrs. Rodriguez, Maya's teacher, stand up from the faculty table. She approached the floor corner, her expression pained, and crouched down to speak quietly with the children there. The teacher pulled something from her purse, looked like granola bars, and distributed them to the floor kids, including Maya. A small act of kindness in an ocean of cruelty. It was enough to give Jackson a moment of clarity. If he went in there and beat the shit out of Higgins, which every fiber of his being wanted to do, the man would press charges. Jackson would go to jail, and Maya would end up in foster care, bouncing between homes until she aged out of the system, broken and lost. No, this required a different approach. Jackson took a deep breath, squared his shoulders, and pushed open the cafeteria door. The hinges squealed, a sound that cut through the cafeteria chatter like a gunshot. Every head turned toward the entrance. Jackson stepped inside, his 6'4" frame filling the doorway. He wasn't trying to be intimidating, wasn't trying to look dangerous, but 30 years of living the outlaw life had carved itself into his features, his posture, his very presence. The cafeteria fell silent. Maya's head snapped up, her tear-stained face going pale. Daddy. Jackson walked toward her, his boots clicking on the linoleum with measured precision. Students scrambled out of his path. Teachers half rose from their seats, uncertain whether to intervene. He reached the corner where his daughter sat on the floor like a prisoner, and for a moment, he simply looked at her. Really looked at her. 8 years old. Should have been laughing with her friends, trading snacks, complaining about homework. Instead, she sat on this filthy floor, her spirit slowly being crushed by a petty tyrant in a cheap suit. Jackson crouched down, bringing himself to her eye level. How long, baby girl? Maya's lip trembled. Daddy, how long? 2 weeks, she whispered. Since you didn't pay the fee. But Daddy, it's okay, I don't mind, Jackson pulled her into his arms, lunch tray and all, lifting her off the floor as he stood. She wrapped her small arms around his neck, burying her face in his shoulder. It's not okay, Jackson said quietly, his voice carrying in the silent cafeteria. None of this is okay. Mr. Thorne. Jackson turned to see Principal Higgins rushing across the cafeteria, his face flushed with indignation and what might have been a flicker of fear. Mr. Thorne, you can't just barge in here and what? Jackson's voice was deadly calm. Take my daughter off the floor where you put her? The floor you made her eat on for 2 weeks. Higgins drew himself up to his full height, which was still a good 6 inches shorter than Jackson. This is school policy. Students whose families refuse to meet their financial obligations. Financial obligations? Jackson's laugh was devoid of humor. I pay her lunch fees every month. I pay for her field trips, her school supplies, every goddamn thing this school actually requires. What I won't pay is your made-up bullshit fee that you invented to extort parents. How dare you, Higgins sputtered. I could have you arrested for trespassing, for making threats. I haven't threatened you. Jackson's eyes locked onto Higgins with laser focus. But I promise you this. You will regret ever putting my daughter on this floor. You will regret every tear she cried while you stood there smiling. Jackson adjusted Maya in his arms and started walking toward the exit. If you remove her from school premises without permission, Higgins called after him, his voice shrill with desperation to maintain control, she'll be marked as truant. There will be consequences. Jackson stopped at the cafeteria door and looked back over his shoulder. When he spoke, his voice carried to every corner of the room, to the students, the teachers, the lunch ladies, and especially to Principal Arthur Higgins. You have no idea what consequences look like, but you're about to learn. Then he walked out, carrying his daughter, leaving behind a cafeteria full of stunned witnesses and one very nervous principal. The Iron Vanguard Motorcycle Club's main clubhouse sat at the end of Industrial Way, a converted warehouse that had once manufactured automotive parts. Now it served as the headquarters for one of the most powerful outlaw motorcycle clubs in the state. Jackson carried Maya through the front entrance, past the patches on the wall commemorating fallen brothers, past the pool tables and the bar, straight to his private office in the back. "Bookkeeper, Rook, get your asses in here now." His voice boomed through the clubhouse. Maya clung to him, her small frame still shaking. "Daddy, I'm sorry. I didn't want to tell you because—" "Shoo." Jackson sat down in his chair, keeping her on his lap. "You have nothing to be sorry for, baby. Nothing. You understand me." She nodded against his chest. Within 90 seconds, his office filled with the club's senior leadership. Marcus, Rook, Henderson, VP and the club's tech specialist. Vincent, bookkeeper, Chun, SAA and a former forensic accountant before an embezzlement charge that he actually didn't commit, sent him looking for a different life. Tommy Wrench, O'Brien, road captain and the closest thing the club had to a moral compass. They took one look at Maya's tear-stained face and Jackson's expression, and their faces hardened. "Who do we kill?" Wrench asked simply. "Nobody," Jackson said. "Not yet. Maya, go sit in the lounge with Mrs. Chun. She'll make you hot chocolate." "But Daddy, I need to talk with my brothers." "I'll be right out." Jackson kissed her forehead. "I promise, baby girl. We're going to fix this." After Maya left, closing the door behind her, Jackson stood and walked to the window overlooking the garage bays. Principal Arthur Higgins at Riverside Elementary has been running a protection racket on poor families. Invented fake fees. Any parent who doesn't pay gets their kid punished. How punished? Rook's voice was cold. He makes them eat lunch sitting on the cafeteria floor. Like dogs. Maya's been doing it for 2 weeks. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. "I'll have the boys ready to move in 20 minutes, Wrench said, already reaching for his phone. "We burn the school down and make it look like an electrical fire." "No." Jackson turned from the window. "That helps nobody. Maya still needs to go to school. And Higgins still walks away with his pension and probably gets hired somewhere else to torture more kids." "So what's the play, boss?" Bookkeeper asked. Jackson's smile was predatory. "We destroy him. Completely. Legally. Make him famous for all the wrong reasons." He pointed at Bookkeeper. "I need you to audit that school's finances. Every dollar in, every dollar out. I want to know if Higgins is stealing, which I guarantee he is." Bookkeeper nodded. "I'll need access to their systems." "Which is where you come in." Jackson turned to Rook. "Hack their network. Get Bookkeeper everything he needs. Also, dig up everything you can find on Higgins. Where he worked before, who he associates with, what he does after school hours. I want his life mapped out. On it." Rook's fingers were already flying across his phone screen. "Wrench, reach out to our contacts at the local news stations. Find out which reporter would be most interested in a story about a corrupt principal targeting vulnerable children." "I know a guy at Channel 7, Wrench offered. "Owes us for helping his kid when she had some trouble last year." "Perfect." Jackson leaned against his desk. "Gentlemen, we're going to wage a very different kind of war. No violence. No property damage. Just pure, legal destruction." "Boss," Bookkeeper said carefully. "If we're doing this clean, it's going to take time. Could be days, maybe a week. Then Maya doesn't go back to that school until we're ready to move." Jackson's jaw set. "I'll deal with the truancy threats. That asshole wants to play bureaucrat? Fine. I can play too." The men dispersed, each to their assigned tasks. Jackson remained in his office, staring at the wall where Maya's artwork hung. Drawings she'd made of her and her daddy on the motorcycle, stick figures with big smiles. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Mr. Thorne, this is Elena Rodriguez, Maya's teacher. What you saw today has been happening to multiple students for weeks. I've tried reporting it to the district, but Higgins has friends in high places. If you're serious about stopping him, I have documentation. Meet me at the Coffee Bean on Maple Street tonight at 8 p.m. Come alone." Jackson stared at the message for a long moment, then smiled. Maybe he wasn't the only one who wanted to watch Higgins burn. The Coffee Bean was a dive that had somehow survived 3 economic recessions and 2 attempted gentrifications. It sat on the edge of downtown, the kind of place where night shift nurses and insomniacs congregated for burnt coffee and honest conversation. Jackson arrived at 7:55 p.m., taking a corner booth where he could watch both entrances. Old habits from a life lived on the edge. Elena Rodriguez arrived exactly at 8, carrying a worn messenger bag and looking nervously over her shoulder. She was in her late 30s, Jackson guessed, with tired eyes that suggested she'd been fighting losing battles for too long. She slid into the booth across from him. "Thank you for coming. Thank you for reaching out." Jackson pushed a coffee across the table, black, the way she'd ordered it in the cafeteria. "How long have you been teaching at Riverside?" 7 years. 6 of them were good. Elena wrapped her hands around the cup. Then Higgins arrived last year, and everything changed. Changed how? Elena pulled a manila folder from her bag and slid it across the table. Higgins came from a private academy that quietly let him go after financial irregularities. But he had connections at the district office. His brother-in-law is on the school board, so he landed at Riverside. Jackson opened the folder. Inside were printed emails, spreadsheets, and photographs. He started small. Elena continued. New fees for things that used to be free. Technology enhancement. Facility improvement. Administrative overhead. Parents complained, but the district backed him up. Said principals had discretion to manage their budgets. Jackson scanned the spreadsheets. These numbers don't add up. Exactly. Elena leaned forward. The lunch program is federally funded. The state provides additional grants for low-income students. But somehow, the cafeteria is serving food that costs maybe 50 cents per meal, while Higgins claims we're spending $5 per student. Where's the rest going? Elena pulled out her phone and showed Jackson a photograph. It was Higgins's office, wood paneling, leather furniture, a coffee machine that probably cost more than Elena's monthly salary. New carpeting in his office. A parking space renovated just for him. He took a curriculum research trip to Hawaii last month that cost $8,000. Elena's voice shook with anger. Meanwhile, my classroom has textbooks from 2008, and I buy pencils for my students out of my own pocket. Jackson felt the familiar heat building in his chest, but this time it came with cold calculation. You said he's been punishing students whose parents don't pay the fake fees. It started about 6 weeks ago. He calls it behavioral correction seating. Claims students with disciplinary issues need to be separated during lunch. Elena's hands tightened around her coffee cup. But the only kids who end up on the floor are the ones whose parents can't or won't pay his made-up fees. Poor kids. Kids whose parents don't speak English well. Kids like Maya, whose families he sees as undesirable. Has anyone tried to stop him? I reported it to the district office 3 times. Each time, Higgins's brother-in-law shut it down. Said I was exaggerating, that I was a troublemaker, that maybe I should look for employment elsewhere if I wasn't happy with the school's policies. Jackson looked at the teacher carefully. Why are you helping me? You could lose your job. Elena met his eyes steadily. Because I became a teacher to help children, not to watch them be tortured by a bureaucratic sadist. And because... She hesitated. My son was killed in Afghanistan 5 years ago. He was a Marine. I see his courage in what you're trying to do for your daughter. Jackson felt something shift in his chest. I'm sorry for your loss. I'm sorry for what Maya's been going through. Elena pulled out another document. This is the school district's policy manual. Section 47B explicitly prohibits any form of punishment that involves denying students access to standard cafeteria facilities. What Higgins is doing is illegal under district policy. But the district won't enforce their own rules. Not unless they're forced to. Elena slid one more item across the table, a thumb drive. This contains copies of all my documentation. Emails, photographs, spreadsheets showing the financial discrepancies, and video footage from my classroom that overlooks the cafeteria entrance. You can see Higgins selecting students for floor punishment. Jackson stared at the thumb drive. This could cost you your career. Maybe, but I'll sleep better knowing I tried to stop a monster instead of becoming complicit through silence. Elena stood. Do whatever you're planning to do, Mr. Thorne. Do it fast, before more children are damaged by that man. She left the coffee shop without looking back. Jackson pocketed the thumb drive and opened his phone, sending a group text to his inner circle. We've got everything we need. Time to assemble the cavalry. Back at the clubhouse, Bookkeeper had transformed the main meeting room into something resembling a forensic accounting war room. Printouts covered every surface. 3 laptops hummed with data. Rook looked up when Jackson entered. "Boss, you're going to want to see this." Jackson walked to the main monitor, where Rook had pulled up Higgins's financial records, the ones that weren't supposed to be accessible to anyone outside the IRS. "Our dear principal," Rook began, his voice dripping with disgust, "has been embezzling from the school lunch program for the past 18 months. Conservative estimate? About $45,000. Where's it going?" Bookkeeper took over. "Offshore account in the Cayman Islands. Amateur hour setup." He probably Googled how to hide money and followed the first result. "We traced payments from the account to online gambling sites, a luxury car lease, and what appears to be monthly payments to a woman in Nevada who's definitely not his wife." "Wait," Jackson said. "Higgins is married. 23 years. 2 kids in college." Rook pulled up a family photo from social media. Wholesome suburban family man. Little league coach. Deacon at his church. Meanwhile, he's stealing from children and punishing the ones whose parents can't afford his shakedown. Jackson felt his rage crystallizing into something sharp and focused. "What else do we have?" Wrench entered the room. "Just got off the phone with my contact at Channel 7. Marcus Wu, investigative reporter. He's very interested in our story, especially after I sent him a preview of what we've got. He's ready to move when we are." "Good." Jackson looked around at his brothers. "Here's how this plays out. Tomorrow is Thursday. On Friday, we make our move." "What kind of move are we talking about?" Wrench asked. Jackson's smile was cold as winter. "We're going to give Riverside Elementary a lunch period they'll never forget. Rook, I need you to coordinate with our boys. I want 60 bikes ready to roll Friday at 11 a.m. Wrench, you're in charge of acquiring supplies. I'll send you a list. Bookkeeper, prepare a presentation of all the financial evidence. Make it simple enough for a 3rd grader to understand." "Boss," Bookkeeper said carefully, "if we're doing what I think we're doing, this is going to make national news." "Good. The bigger the audience, the harder Higgins falls." Jackson pulled out Elena's thumb drive. "And I want this entire district to see what happens when you fuck with someone's kid." The men exchanged glances, then Rook broke into a grin. "This is either the most brilliant thing we've ever done or the stupidest." "Sometimes," Jackson said, "they're the same thing." Friday morning dawned clear and cold. Maya had spent the night at the clubhouse, sleeping in the guest room while the Iron Vanguard prepared for war. Jackson woke her at 6 a.m. "Baby girl, get dressed. We're going to school today." Maya's eyes went wide. "But you said I didn't have to go back." "Trust me." Jackson kissed her forehead. "Today's going to be different. Today, we're going to make sure no kid ever has to sit on that floor again." At 10:30 a.m., 63 Harley-Davidson motorcycles sat idling in the Iron Vanguard clubhouse parking lot. The rumble was enough to vibrate windows 3 blocks away. Each bike was ridden by a club member in full colors, leather vests emblazoned with the Iron Vanguard patch, faces weathered by years of living outside society's rules. These were men who'd survived gang wars, federal investigations, and their own demons. Men who'd kill for their president without hesitation. Today, they were riding for a different kind of justice. 2 18-wheel refrigerated trucks pulled up behind the convoy. Wrench jumped down from the first one, giving Jackson a thumbs up. "Got everything on your list, boss. Plus a few extras." Behind the trucks, a white news van with the Channel 7 logo pulled into the lot. Marcus Wu, a young reporter with sharp eyes and expensive camera equipment, approached Jackson. "Mr. Thorne, I want to confirm what we discussed on the phone." "You get exclusive coverage of what happens today," Jackson said. "In exchange, you air the full story. The embezzlement, the child abuse, all of it. No editing to make it palatable. Deal?" Marcus extended his hand. "This is either going to win me a Peabody or get me fired. Let's aim for both." Jackson shook his hand, then turned to his assembled club. "Brothers, today we ride not for territory, not for respect, but for something more important. We ride for the children who've been silenced and abused by a system that's supposed to protect them." A roar of approval echoed through the parking lot. "We will show that school, that principal, and this entire district that you don't fuck with family. You don't torture children. And you sure as hell don't mess with an Iron Vanguard's daughter." More roars. Engines revving. Maya sat on Jackson's bike behind him, wearing her purple helmet and the biggest smile he'd seen in weeks. "Mount up," Jackson called. "We've got a lunch period to crash." The convoy pulled out of the parking lot in formation. 63 motorcycles, 2 semi-trucks, and a news van headed toward Riverside Elementary School like a mechanized thunderstorm. Traffic pulled over. Pedestrians stared. Someone called the police. Multiple someones, judging by the scanner chatter that Rook monitored from his bike. They arrived at Riverside Elementary at 11:07 a.m. The parking lot was moderately full. Teacher cars, a few maintenance vehicles, nothing that couldn't be worked around. Jackson led the convoy past the visitor spots, past the staff parking, right up to the front entrance where the sidewalk was widest. He killed his engine. 62 other engines died in perfect synchronization. The silence that followed was deafening. Jackson dismounted, helped Maya down, and looked at the school entrance where several teachers and the secretary, Mrs. Patterson, had rushed out to see what the commotion was about. Mrs. Patterson's hand flew to her mouth. "Mr. Thorne, what?" "Morning, Mrs. Patterson." Jackson's voice was pleasant, almost cheerful. "We're here to deliver lunch for the students. Hope that's okay." The secretary looked at the convoy, at the trucks, at the news cameras already rolling, and seemed to realize she was watching history being made. I'll get Principal Higgins." "You do that." Jackson turned to his club. "Let's unload." The back doors of the refrigerated trucks opened, and what emerged made even the hardened bikers whistle in appreciation. The first thing out of the trucks was a mobile grill, professional grade, the kind used at high-end catering events. Wrench and 4 club members rolled it toward the cafeteria entrance while other members began unloading coolers. Steaks. Actual, honest-to-God ribeye steaks. Enough for every student in the school, plus extras. Lobster tails. Fresh corn on the cob. Baked potatoes with all the fixings. Caesar salad. Fresh fruit platters. And, because this was an elementary school, enough pizza from the best local pizzeria to feed a small army. Oh, and 300 cupcakes from Maya's favorite bakery. What the hell is going on here? Principal Arthur Higgins burst out of the school entrance like an angry wasp from a disturbed nest. His face was flushed, his carefully styled hair already disheveling in his agitation. He stopped short when he saw the convoy. 63 bikers, all standing in perfect formation, all watching him with expressions that ranged from contempt to barely controlled rage. "Mr. Thorne, you can't. This is school property." Higgins sputtered. "I'm calling the police." "Already on their way, I imagine." Jackson walked toward Higgins with measured steps. Multiple concerned citizens probably reported a motorcycle gang invading an elementary school. But here's the thing, Principal Higgins, we're not invading. We're catering. Catering. That's right. See, I heard the school lunch program has been serving substandard food. Thought the children deserved better. So the Iron Vanguard Motorcycle Club is providing today's lunch. Free of charge. Behind Higgins, students had started gathering at the windows, their faces pressed against the glass in amazement. Teachers were trying to maintain order, but even they were staring. "You can't just. There are regulations, health codes, permissions required." "Already handled." Bookkeeper stepped forward, holding a folder. "This is a copy of the catering permit we obtained from the City Health Department. Everything is completely legal and up to code. Our chef," he gestured to a massive biker with a handlebar mustache, "is ServSafe certified." The chef, whose road name was Grill, gave a little wave. Higgins's face went from red to purple. "I don't care about your permits. This is my school, and I will not have your school." Jackson's voice dropped to a dangerous purr. "Funny you should mention that." He gestured to Bookkeeper, who pulled out a laptop and set it up on the hood of a car. The screen displayed a spreadsheet that even from a distance looked damning. "This is an accounting of the Riverside Elementary lunch program for the past 18 months, Bookkeeper announced, his voice carrying across the parking lot. "According to federal and state records, this school receives approximately $7.50 per student per day for lunch funding." He clicked to the next slide, showing photographs of the cafeteria food, the gray mystery meat, the soggy pizza, the bruised fruit. "This is what students have been eating. Estimated cost per meal? About 52 cents. Murmurs rippled through the growing crowd of teachers and staff. "Now, you might ask, where's the rest of the money going?" Bookkeeper clicked again. "Here's Principal Higgins's office renovation, completed last August. Cost, $12,000. Here's his curriculum research trip to Maui. Cost, $8,300. Here's the luxury car lease he's been paying for with school funds. Monthly cost, $850. Higgins had gone pale. This is slander. These are private financial records. You had no right. We had every right, Jackson interrupted. Because while you were stealing from children, you were also punishing the ones whose parents wouldn't pay your fake fees. He pulled out his phone and connected it to the laptop. A video began playing, footage from Elena Rodriguez's classroom overlooking the cafeteria entrance. The video showed Higgins, clear as day, selecting students from the lunch line and directing them to the floor. His voice was audible. You know where your seat is. Maybe when your family learns to contribute properly. The watching teachers gasped. Several looked horrified. They hadn't known, Jackson realized. Higgins had kept it contained to lunch period when most teachers were in their own rooms. That's my daughter. Jackson pointed to Maya in the video, sitting on the floor with tears running down her face. 8 years old. Eating on the floor like an animal because I wouldn't pay your extortion fee. 2 police cars pulled into the parking lot, sirens off, but lights flashing. Officers Martinez and Shin stepped out, both men Jackson recognized from community events the club sponsored. Good cops who actually gave a damn about their neighborhoods. We got multiple calls about a disturbance, Officer Martinez said cautiously, taking in the scene. Someone want to explain what's happening? These criminals are trespassing on school property, Higgins practically shrieked. I want them arrested immediately. Actually, a new voice interrupted. I think you'll find they have every right to be here. A woman in her 50s stepped out of a BMW that had just pulled up, Dr. Patricia Morrison, the district superintendent. Elena Rodriguez must have called her. Dr. Morrison approached the laptop, studied the evidence for several long moments, then turned to Higgins. Her face could have been carved from granite. Principal Higgins, you're suspended effective immediately pending a full investigation. Turn in your keys and employee ID. You can't. I have rights. My brother-in-law. Your brother-in-law just called me 20 minutes ago to resign from the school board. Dr. Morrison's smile was thin and sharp. Apparently, once he realized his association with you was about to become national news, he decided to distance himself. Funny how that works. Marcus Wu's camera captured every second. Jackson walked up to Higgins, stopping close enough that the shorter man had to crane his neck to meet his eyes. You wanted to teach my daughter about consequences, Jackson said softly. Consider this your final lesson. He turned to the club. Let's feed these kids. The cafeteria transformation happened with military precision. Within 20 minutes, the Iron Vanguard had converted the space into something that looked like a cross between a high-end restaurant and a carnival. The portable grills were set up outside the cafeteria doors, where Grill and his team worked magic with ribeye steaks and lobster tails. The smell alone was enough to make students press harder against the windows. Inside, club members, after going through the school's visitor check-in process, because they were doing this legally, damn it, had rearranged the tables into a grand feast setup. Red tablecloths appeared from somewhere. Real plates and silverware, borrowed from the local event rental company, who'd been more than happy to provide supplies once they heard what was happening. The news cameras followed everything. This is Marcus Wu, Channel 7 News, and I'm standing at Riverside Elementary, where members of the Iron Vanguard Motorcycle Club have taken over the cafeteria, not with violence, but with what might be the most elaborate act of community service this district has ever seen. Jackson stood in the center of the cafeteria, looking at the space that had become his daughter's prison. Then he walked to the far corner, where the floor was still stained from weeks of spilled food and children's tears. He sat down, right there on the floor, his back against the wall, exactly where Maya had been forced to sit. The cafeteria, now filling with students released early for lunch, went dead silent. Mr. Thorne? It was Mrs. Rodriguez, looking uncertain. What are you doing? Experiencing the accommodations Principal Higgins provided for students whose families didn't meet his standards. Jackson's voice carried through the room. Maya, sweetheart, come here. Maya approached slowly, her purple helmet still tucked under her arm. Show me exactly where you sat. Maya pointed to a spot right next to where Jackson was sitting. Here, Daddy. Michael Patterson sat there. She pointed to another spot. And Jenny Martinez was over there. Jackson gestured to the floor beside him. Michael, Jenny, why don't you come here? The two children approached nervously. Jackson could see their parents hovering in the cafeteria entrance. The school had called them when the convoy arrived, and they'd rushed over in a panic. Sit down with me, Jackson said gently. All three of you. One last time. The children sat, Maya in the middle. How long did you sit here, Michael? Jackson asked. The boy with the thick glasses looked at his shoes. 4 weeks. My mom works 2 jobs, and she couldn't afford the textbook fee Principal Higgins made up. Jenny. 3 weeks, the girl whispered. Because my sister got in trouble last year. Jackson nodded, then looked up at the crowd of students, teachers, and parents now packed into the cafeteria. The news camera was recording everything. Principal Higgins isn't here right now. He's probably in his very expensive office, calling his lawyer. But if he were here, I want him to see this view. The view these children had every day while their classmates ate at proper tables. He gestured to the garbage bins, the mop bucket, the stained floor. This is what he thought these children deserved. Because their parents worked too many hours to make his made-up meetings. Because their families didn't drive the right cars or live in the right neighborhoods. Because they were vulnerable, and he was a bully with a title. Jackson stood, bringing Maya up with him. Michael and Jenny followed. But here's what Principal Higgins didn't understand about consequences. Jackson's voice hardened. He thought he could hide behind his title, his board connections, his fancy degrees. He thought no one would care about a few poor kids eating on the floor. He looked directly at the camera. He was wrong. Bookkeeper stepped forward with the laptop, now connected to a portable projector that displayed the evidence on the cafeteria wall. Arthur Higgins embezzled $47,300 from the federal lunch program over 18 months, Bookkeeper announced. He used school funds for personal luxuries while forcing students to eat food that barely met minimum nutritional standards. And when parents questioned him, he retaliated by psychologically abusing their children. The images cycled: Higgins's office renovation, bank statements, the offshore account, the video of him selecting children for floor punishment. This is what happens, Jackson continued, when someone forgets that they're supposed to serve the community, not rule it. When they think their position makes them untouchable. He looked around the cafeteria at the faces watching him, students who'd been terrified, teachers who'd felt helpless, parents who'd been intimidated into silence. We're going to do things differently now. Today, every student in this school eats like royalty. And after today, if anyone, principal, teacher, anyone, tries to make a child feel less than human because of their family's circumstances, they're going to answer to every single person in this room who watched what we accomplished here today. A spontaneous applause broke out. It started with Mrs. Rodriguez, spread to the other teachers, then to the parents, and finally to the students themselves. Jackson raised his hand for silence. Now, I believe we have some steaks to serve. Maya, Michael, Jenny, you three get to be first in line. And you're going to sit at the best table in this cafeteria. The children beamed. Grill called from outside. Steaks are ready. Come and get 'em. What followed was perhaps the most surreal lunch period in Riverside elementary history. Hardened bikers in leather vests served medium-rare ribeyes to third graders. Club members helped kindergartners crack open lobster tails. Wrench, a man who'd once beaten 3 people unconscious in a bar fight, patiently helped a first grader get the perfect amount of butter on her baked potato. Maya sat at the center table, flanked by her father on one side and her friends on the other, eating the best meal the cafeteria had ever seen. Marcus Wu moved through the crowd, interviewing teachers, parents, students. Everyone had a story about Higgins's cruelty or incompetence or greed. And through it all, Jackson watched his daughter laugh with her friends, her face bright with joy instead of shadowed with shame. This, he thought, was what justice looked like. Dr. Patricia Morrison stood at the cafeteria entrance, watching the controlled chaos with an expression that was equal parts horror and admiration. She'd been superintendent of the district for 12 years. She'd dealt with budget crises, teacher strikes, the occasional scandal. But she'd never seen anything quite like this. Jackson approached her, 2 plates in his hands, one with steak and lobster, the other with a simpler selection of pizza and salad. Superintendent Morrison. He offered her the second plate. Hungry, she stared at the plate, then at him. Mr. Thorne, do you have any idea what kind of position you've put me in? I imagine a difficult one. Jackson said calmly. You've got a corrupt principal who was stealing from children and abusing them psychologically. You've got a motorcycle club that just exposed him on live television. And you've got a community that's about to demand answers for how this was allowed to happen under your watch. Dr. Morrison's jaw tightened. Higgins's brother-in-law was on the board. Every time I tried to investigate complaints about Riverside, I was shut down, told I was overreacting, that I needed to trust principals to manage their own schools. And now that brother-in-law has resigned, leaving you holding the bag. Precisely. She set the plate down on a nearby table. I should be furious with you. This whole spectacle could have been handled through proper channels. Could it? Jackson's eyes hardened. How many reports did Elena Rodriguez file about the floor punishment? 3, 4? What happened to those reports? Dr. Morrison had the grace to look ashamed. They were intercepted. I never saw them. Convenient. Meanwhile, my daughter spent 2 weeks eating on a floor covered in trash and spilled milk. I understand your anger. Do you? Jackson stepped closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. I run a motorcycle club. We operate in the gray areas of the law. We've made our peace with what that means. But you're supposed to be the good guys. You're supposed to protect children. Instead, you built a bureaucracy that protected a predator because challenging him was politically inconvenient. Dr. Morrison met his gaze steadily. You're right, and I'm going to fix it. How? She pulled out her phone and showed him an email she'd just sent, copying it to the entire school board, the mayor's office, and the regional education authority. Effective immediately, I'm ordering a full audit of every school in the district. Financial and administrative. Any principal who's been running schemes like Higgins will be exposed and removed. I'm also implementing a mandatory reporting system where students and parents can report abuse directly to my office, bypassing local administrators. Jackson read the email, then nodded slowly. That's a good start. It's more than a start. It's a promise. Dr. Morrison's voice hardened with determination. Arthur Higgins is going to face criminal charges. I've already spoken with the DA's office. Embezzlement, child abuse, theft of federal funds. He's looking at serious prison time. And the other children he punished? Counseling services paid for by the district. And I'm personally going to apologize to each family. She looked at Maya, now laughing as Rook showed her a card trick. Starting with yours. She approached Maya's table, and the cafeteria quieted slightly. Maya Thorne. Dr. Morrison's voice was gentle. I'm Dr. Morrison, the superintendent. I wanted to tell you how sorry I am for what happened to you here. You did nothing wrong. Nothing. And what Principal Higgins did to you was cruel and illegal. Maya looked at her father, who nodded encouragingly. It's okay, Maya said quietly. My daddy fixed it. He did. And he shouldn't have had to. Dr. Morrison pulled out a card and handed it to Jackson. This is my direct number. If Maya, or any child in this district, ever faces anything like this again, you call me immediately. No bureaucracy, no middlemen. Straight to me. Jackson pocketed the card. I'll hold you to that. Please do. Dr. Morrison looked around the cafeteria. Mr. Thorne, I have to ask, what you did here today, the food, the evidence presentation, the media coverage, this was planned military precision. Jackson smiled slightly. I learned a long time ago that the best revenge isn't violence. It's making your enemies' sins so visible they can't be ignored. Where did you learn that? From every cop who ever tried to pin something on my club and failed because we knew the law better than they did. He paused. We're not criminals, Dr. Morrison. We're outlaws. There's a difference. I'm beginning to see that. Marcus Wu approached with his camera crew. Dr. Morrison, can I get a statement? The superintendent straightened her shoulders, suddenly every inch the district leader. The Riverside Elementary situation is unacceptable and will not be tolerated. Principal Higgins has been suspended and will face criminal prosecution. The district will be conducting a comprehensive review of all our schools to ensure this never happens again. And I want to thank Mr. Thorne and the Iron Vanguard for bringing this matter to light, though I wish it had been possible through proper channels. What do you say to critics who might call today's events a publicity stunt? Marcus asked. Dr. Morrison looked at the bikers serving food to children, at Maya's bright smile, at the evidence still projected on the wall. I'd say that sometimes it takes an outsider to remind us what we're supposed to be doing in the first place. Protecting and serving children, not bureaucratic interests. The interview continued, but Jackson tuned it out. He had more important things to focus on, like watching his daughter experience the simple joy of eating lunch without shame. By 12:30 p.m., every student at Riverside Elementary had been fed. The younger children had devoured pizza and fruit with enthusiasm. The older students had tentatively tried lobster for the first time in their lives. Even the teachers had been served, with several of them openly crying at the gesture. The transformation of the cafeteria was complete. What had been a place of institutional cruelty now looked like a celebration. Grill had outdone himself, somehow managing to cook over 300 steaks to various temperatures based on student preferences. Wrench had coordinated the dessert service. Those 300 cupcakes from Maya's favorite bakery, each one decorated with colorful frosting and sprinkles. Jackson stood near the serving area, watching the controlled chaos, when he felt a small hand slip into his. "Daddy." Maya looked up at him with those huge dark eyes that melted his heart every time. "Is this real? Or am I going to wake up and it'll still be?" She didn't finish the sentence, but she didn't have to. Jackson crouched down to her level. "It's real, baby girl. And you know what else is real? You never have to be afraid here again. You never have to hide what's happening. And if anyone, anywhere, ever makes you feel small, you tell me. Immediately. Even if it's someone important. Especially if it's someone important." Jackson tapped her nose gently. "Because you're important too. More important than any principal or superintendent or anyone else. You understand?" Maya nodded, then threw her arms around his neck. "I love you, Daddy. I love you too, Princess. More than anything in this world." Over Maya's shoulder, Jackson saw Elena Rodriguez approaching. The teacher's eyes were red from crying. "Mr. Thorne, I don't know how to thank you. You already did. You gave me the evidence I needed." Jackson stood, keeping Maya's hand in his. "You risked your career for these kids. So did you." Elena smiled through her tears. "I heard Dr. Morrison offering you her direct number. That's unheard of." "Good. Should have been heard of a long time ago." Jackson looked around the cafeteria. "Mrs. Rodriguez, can I ask you something?" "Of course. When Maya comes back to school on Monday, will things be different? Really different? Or is this just a one-day fix before everything slides back to the way it was?" Elena's expression turned fierce. "Things will be different. I promise you that. We teachers have been talking. We're forming a committee to monitor administrative decisions. If a new principal tries anything like what Higgins did, we'll shut it down immediately. And Dr. Morrison's new reporting system means students can go over our heads if we fail them." "Good." Jackson squeezed Maya's hand. "Because my daughter deserves better than to be afraid at school. All our students deserve better. And they're going to get it." Across the cafeteria, Bookkeeper was conducting an impromptu math lesson with a group of fifth graders, showing them how to calculate the cost difference between the cheap cafeteria food and the feast they'd just eaten. The kids were outraged to learn how much money had been diverted from their lunches. Rook was teaching some second graders about computer coding, though Jackson suspected he was carefully not mentioning exactly what he'd coded to get Higgins's financial records. Wrench had attracted a crowd of boys who wanted to hear motorcycle stories. He was telling them about a cross-country ride he'd done years ago, emphasizing the importance of planning, safety, and respecting the rules of the road. Even Grill had an audience, teaching some culinary-curious students the basics of food safety and why cooking temperatures mattered. For men who'd spent most of their lives on society's margins, being welcomed into an elementary school cafeteria as heroes was a strange, but not unwelcome experience. "Mr. Thorne?" A timid voice interrupted his thoughts. He looked down to see Michael Patterson, the boy with the thick glasses who'd sat on the floor with Maya. "Yeah, Michael. I just wanted to say thank you. For today, and for not forgetting about the rest of us." The boy's voice wavered. "When Maya stopped coming to school, I thought she'd just transferred somewhere better. I didn't know her dad was planning this." Jackson crouched down again. "Michael, what's your mom's name?" "Susan Patterson. She works at the hospital and the grocery store." "She works 2 jobs to take care of you?" "Yeah. She says we're doing fine, but I know things are hard." Michael's eyes filled with tears. "I tried to tell her about the floor thing, but she has so much to worry about already, and Principal Higgins said if we complained, things would get worse." Jackson felt the rage stirring again, but he kept his voice gentle. "Michael, your mom sounds like a hero to me. Working 2 jobs to give you a good life? That's not easy. And you know what? People like my club, We respect hard workers more than anything. He pulled out his wallet and extracted a business card, not the Iron Vanguard one, but one for the club's legitimate motorcycle repair shop. You give this to your mom. Tell her that if she ever needs her car fixed, she brings it to us. We'll give her fair prices, no bullshit. And if anyone at this school ever treats you badly again, you call that number. Someone will answer, and we'll handle it. Michael clutched the card like it was made of gold. Really, really, you're a good kid, Michael. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. After Michael ran back to his friends, Elena approached again. You know you're going to have every struggling family in the district calling you now, right? Jackson shrugged. Good. Better they call us than suffer in silence. You're not what I expected, Elena admitted. When I first saw you at school drop-offs, I made assumptions. Dangerous biker, probably a bad influence on his daughter. Most people make those assumptions. Can't say they're always wrong about bikers in general. Jackson smiled slightly. But we take care of our own. And today, every kid in this school became our own. The November morning was crisp and clear as Jackson's Harley rumbled into the Riverside Elementary parking lot. But this time, he wasn't alone. Behind him rode 5 other club members, a voluntary escort that had become tradition over the past month. The students had gone from being terrified of the motorcycles to rushing to the windows to wave at them during morning drop-off. Maya dismounted, grabbing her backpack. She wore a t-shirt that Grill had made for her, a cartoon unicorn riding a motorcycle with the words Princess of the Iron Vanguard emblazoned across the front. At the school entrance stood the new principal, Dr. James Carter, a soft-spoken former teacher who'd been promoted from within the district. He waved at Jackson, who waved back. Things had changed significantly in the months since what the media had dubbed the cafeteria coup. Principal Higgins had been arrested on 17 counts of embezzlement, child abuse, and fraud. His trial was set for early next year, and his lawyer had already indicated they'd likely plead guilty in exchange for a reduced sentence. Not that it would help much. Higgins was looking at minimum 5 years in federal prison. His brother-in-law had resigned from the school board in disgrace. 2 other board members who'd been protecting Higgins had also stepped down. Dr. Morrison had made good on her promises. The district-wide audit had uncovered 2 other principals running similar schemes, both of whom had been immediately terminated and prosecuted. The new reporting system had already fielded over 30 complaints that were being actively investigated. The cafeteria had been completely renovated with money recovered from Higgins's offshore account. New tables, new chairs, better equipment. And the floor where Maya had been forced to sit, the school had installed a memorial plaque, in memory of the resilience of all students who were unjustly treated here. May this reminder ensure such injustice never happens again. Maya had been the one to unveil it during a school assembly, her voice strong and clear as she read the inscription. The Iron Vanguard had become unexpected heroes in the community. Other schools had invited them to speak about standing up to injustice. The club had started a scholarship fund for students from low-income families. And Grill's catering business, previously a small side operation, had exploded after the publicity, leading him to hire 3 more club members to help with the workload. Marcus Wu's investigative report had indeed won several journalism awards and had been picked up by national media. The resulting scrutiny had led to reforms in school lunch programs across the state. But for Jackson, the biggest change was the simplest one. Maya was happy again. She bounded into school without fear, surrounded by friends who no longer saw her as the biker's daughter, but just as Maya. Funny, smart, kind Maya who'd survived something terrible and come out stronger. Daddy, she called back from the entrance. Pick me up at 3? Wouldn't miss it, baby girl. She disappeared into the school, and Jackson watched until he couldn't see her anymore. Then he looked at the school building, the place that had nearly broken his daughter's spirit, and allowed himself a small smile of satisfaction. Justice had been served, not with fists or violence, but with evidence, publicity, and the unwavering determination of a father who refused to let his child be broken by a system that had forgotten its purpose. Rook pulled up beside him. Boss, you coming to the clubhouse? We've got that meeting with the youth center about the mentorship program. Yeah, I'll be there. Jackson kick-started his Harley. Just wanted to see her get inside safe. She's good, man. More than good. She's thriving. Jackson nodded. Yeah, she is. As they rode away from Riverside Elementary, the November sun breaking through the clouds, Jackson thought about all the children who were no longer eating on floors. All the families who no longer lived in fear of arbitrary punishment. All the teachers who now had support instead of intimidation. One motorcycle club couldn't fix every broken system, couldn't right every wrong, but they'd fix this one, and that was enough. Behind them, visible in his rearview mirror, Maya appeared at a classroom window. She waved enthusiastically, her face bright with joy. Jackson waved back. His daughter, his fierce, beautiful, resilient daughter, was exactly where she belonged. Safe, happy, free. And if anyone ever tried to take that away from her again, they'd learn the same lesson Arthur Higgins had learned. You don't mess with an Iron Vanguard's family. Not ever.